Hi folks, in this video I'm going to be looking at painting a traditional Games Workshop style edge highlighted ultramarine by focusing on the blue armour of this Sternguard miniature. So without any further ado, let's cue the music. Starting out from a neutral grey primer, I'm going to start by applying a base coat of Macragge blue from Games Workshop all over the miniature. Now I've thinned this down with a little bit of water to ensure that it flows smoothly off the brush, and I'm looking to get a nice even coat within 2 to 3 coats of this paint. I'm absolutely not looking to do this in one pass, so it's just a matter of going around all the miniature, having a bit of patience and knowing that you're going to come back in and do another coat later. Due to the way that I'm going to be painting this miniature, I'm trying to avoid things like the pouches, the tabard, trim, and anything that's going to get painted white or metallic later on. But it doesn't matter if you get blue paint on all those areas. You could use a spray for this bit if you've got the Macragge blue spray from Games Workshop, or put it through an airbrush to speed things up, but I prefer doing things with a brush. So it's just a matter of getting that paint on, waiting for it to dry, and applying a second or third thin coat till you get a nice opaque smooth finish. Once the Macragge blue base coat has been complete, it is time to panel shade the armour. And to do this, I have made a paint mix of 50-50 Viejo Model Black, although you can use any black paint that you'd like, and Kantor Blue from Games Workshop. And I've thinned this down quite heavily with water to a wash consistency, and using a thin and well pointed brush, I am carefully running this into all of the recesses. I am anywhere that there's leading to panel definition or joints in the armour, I am running this paint as a line wash into all these areas. Now don't worry if you make a mistake with this line wash. First things you can do is quickly rinse off your brush and try and wick up any excess, but if you're unable to do this, then you can simply come back in with your original Macragge blue once it has dried and neaten up any areas that you may have spilt over. You may find that you're going to be doing this on harder areas such as the boots and this part up by his waist where you have more difficult access with that cloth, or there's layered armour panels over each other which is causing difficulty in panel definition to be done nicely. As an optional step, you can take this heavily thinned mix and you can drag it down to the bottom of larger armour panels such as these greaves on his legs, so that there is a very subtle transition between the Macragge blue and this shade. You can then use a wet brush to feather out any harsh edges of transitions. This is entirely optional on this step, but it is something that the Heavy Metal team do on their Ultramarines. For the first highlight on the miniature, I have made a 50-50 mix of Macragge blue and Calgar blue, both from Games Workshop. And with this, I'll be applying a chunky edge highlight to all of the edges of the model. And as you can see from here, it's not the starkest highlight in the world, but that's okay. This is quite subtle due to the 50-50 mix. The Macragge blue is a lot darker than the Calgar blue, so this is going to provide a nice subtle highlight onto the miniature. The tricks here are bracing your hand and using the side of your brush where possible rather than the tip to ensure that you get a nice smooth straight line. But if the line is thicker or is wobblier than you like it to be, just wait for the line to dry and then you can touch up with your Macragge blue once this first highlight has dried. So we are happy with our first subtle chunky edge highlight. We can then come in with our first proper edge highlight, and this will be with Calgar Blue from Games Workshop. And with this, I am going to be doing the heavy metal styling, where I'm going to highlight all around the edge of the panel. With this exercise, I was looking to try and do something a lot closer to the box art, and so with this I've thinned the paint down a little, but not so much that you'd use this for layering, and I'm holding the model at angles which allow me to do my edge highlights in a nice vertical motion, as it is much easier to do vertical strokes than it is to do horizontal strokes. And I'm using the side of the brush where I can, and areas that I can't, I'm very carefully using the tip. And the trick with this, to do this thin edge highlight, is to go as slow as possible. You don't want to be rushing these edge highlights, because the more you rush them, the more you're going to end up with wavy and wobbly lines. And don't worry if you're not as thin as you'd like to be with these edge highlights. Doing super thin edge highlights does come with practice and time with brush control. If you can, use a bit of water on a clean brush to wick away any excess paint that you think you've got in place, but failing that, what you want to do is wait for it to dry, then come back in with your previous colour and neaten up the line so the line is thin. There is nothing stopping you coming in with a previous colour paint and tidying up the edge highlights to make them as thin as you'd like them to be. There's no real secret to this, it's just a matter of taking your time, placing your hands on the miniature and making sure that the paint isn't viscous or too wet. There's a nice balance when it comes to doing an edge highlight. It's slightly thicker than a layer, but thinner than it is straight out of the pot. Although you might find with some GW paints that they can be quite thin out the pot and enough for edge highlighting, especially the layer paints. The thing to remember with these edge highlights, if you are edge highlighting somewhere that is very close to a deep recess, such as that upper leg panel that has the two horizontal cuts into it, if you think that you can't do the edge highlight thin enough, or you're going to go into the recess there, don't worry about it. Paint the edge highlight, and once it's dried, come back in with that shadow tone of Kantor blue and black and redo the panel line. There's nothing stopping you from going back and neatening up with the previous colour, as you will get a much nicer finish that you're much happier with, as long as you accept that mistakes are made when painting miniatures, and all you have to do is wait for it to dry and touch up with the previous layer's colour. So we've highlighted all over the marine with that Calgar blue highlight. We can then add in a little bit of blue horror into the Calgar blue and start on a more focused edge highlight onto the miniature. And with this, I'm looking to pick out the sharpest edges and the corners with this paint. This isn't an all-over edge highlight. As you can see on his leg here, I have picked up the corners and the very sharpest point in the rim on the bit covering over his knee. And I'm picking out the corners and the underside of those slits in that upper leg panel, and I'll be using this to pick out the corners and the top edge of the belt and the middle of the knee bit here. We're looking to show areas that the light is hitting at the strongest. Now this is a much more focused edge highlight, and I wouldn't focus this edge highlight on the underside of the panels. We want to do this in what I like to refer as a zenithal edge highlight, and so with this we're going to focus on areas where the light would hit the strongest. So generally, from a miniature that's stood up like this, the main source of light is going to be from the sun, which is, in the sky. So that light is going to be on an upward angle. So on this belt buckle here, you can see I've focused on the upper curved section of that round in the middle, and I'm picking up the top edge and the corners on the clasps on the side. Now this is quite a stark colour, as you can see from the additional of blue horror. You could use rust grey here if you wanted. Rust grey is what the heavy metal team actually use here, but to slim down on the paint joints used, adding a little bit of blue horror into the mix I think does just a nice job and keeps that nice cold feel within the blue armour. And with that, the blue edge highlights on the Ultramarines armour is now complete. These highlights may look very stark at this stage on the miniature, but once you start adding in all the other colours, it will become much less vibrant and will all tie together very nicely. If you like this tutorial, why not consider subscribing? It's free of charge, it helps me out, and you get further videos in your YouTube feed just like this one. So, until next time folks.